A listener note, this story contains adult content and language. If you're listening to this podcast, you might want to go back and start at episode 1. This is a story being told in chronological order. You might miss some details or context that are pretty important to the story. From Exclave Media, this is The Sicario Effect.
Se busca a Pablo Escobar. Recompensa 2,700.
Con John Jairo Velázquez Vázquez. ¿Usted por qué se entrega de nuevo a la justicia?
Porque no le debo nada a la...
A Colombian hired killer known as Popeye has been released from prison.
Hola guerreras y guerreros, yo soy su amigo John Jairo Velázquez Vázquez, conocido como Popeye.
Alias Popeye, mi señor.
Yo soy John Jairo Velázquez Vázquez Popeye, hermana.
Episode 14, Luck of the Draw. Despite going into 2018 with a cloud of uncertainty hanging over his head after being discovered at the now infamous birthday party for the head of La Oficina de Envigado, Juan Carlos Mesa, alias Tom, Popeye is still a free man. I must admit, I'm surprised we're in February and nothing has happened. I've obsessively been checking news reports to see if the government's going to send Popeye back to prison. As of now, nothing. I still feel like they must be doing something. They did file a motion before a judge saying he violated the terms of his release. But even with that, nothing. He's still tweeting every day and making videos. Perhaps I'm naive to think something would have happened by now. There are those who want to see Popeye return to jail. I can only imagine what they must be thinking. The Medellin cartel's victims and their families exist more as statistics than real people. Shows like Narcos aren't really that great at representing victims. And in this case, the part that is really misleading is most people outside of Colombia have a preconceived notion that a victim, in the context of Pablo Escobar, is someone who's either been killed or injured by narcoterrorism. Yet many overlook the countless individuals who were lucky enough to be spared physical harm, but still suffered a unique trauma of having lived in Colombia during Pablo Escobar's campaign of terror. In a way that might be more relatable, think of it this way. In the 2013 Boston Marathon, of the tens of thousands of innocent spectators and runners participating, 3 people were killed and 264 were injured. However, there were many more victims. I'm talking about the thousands who suffered a form of PTSD, all victims of a terrorist attack. Escobar and the Medellin cartel unleashed a relentless wave of terrorism on Colombia. Unfortunately, over the last 20 years, Americans have gained a much greater understanding of the consequences of terrorism. In earlier episodes, I spoke about the Avianca bombing. There were more victims than just the 107 innocent souls on board that day. Monica Gomez Villafañe is a successful and highly respected executive in the Colombian banking industry. Her story isn't one of violence filled with blood and other gory details. Rather, it's very real and quite relatable.
I'm a lawyer. I have a master in public administration from Harvard University. I have worked in various areas of my life. Now I'm working with the bank system in Colombia. I'm the vice president of the Bank Association of Colombia. Previous to this job, I was the secretary general for the Aviation Authority of Colombia. Before that, I have been working with pharmaceuticals. And before that, I have worked with drug policy, counterterrorism, cyber attacks, all from the Ministry of Justice of Colombia.
That was a very violent time in Colombia.
It was. This was the end of the 80s. The war among drug cartels was open. It was overwhelming. Pablo Escobar was insisting at the time of demonstrating his power and his pride for cruelty. It was a very, very difficult time. We're a generation where some of us were raised by fear and by caution. We were all in danger. People were killed in the streets for no reason known. It was a very difficult time.
What did your parents say to you?
Oh my God, nothing. That was an issue that nobody talked about. Actually, in our parents, they were very protective.
Sure.
They were very attentive to our friends, because by by the time there was a mean of power among the markets and the drug cartels, and this involved politicians and government officials and judges and lawyers and etc. Name it. Everyone was somehow involved with the drug cartels. So they were very protective. They would always look after your friends. Where were you going? At what time were you leaving? Everything. But this was not an open issue. They would never talk about it because everything is very dangerous, but they never talked to us about this issue.
And there was violence in Cali, not as much as in Medellin.
Yes.
How do you shield your children from that at the same time, make it seem it's a really big challenge, I think.
Yes, because actually we were always in the same places. We could only be at our friends' houses, or in the parties were inside the houses, or at school, or in the club. We were always grounded somewhere.
Did you know anybody that was a victim of any narco violence?
Yes, of course. You always know someone, or it's a relative of someone, or it's a friend of your friends, or it's there's always, you always know someone.
We're going to go back to like 1989. What were you doing at the time?
Okay, that was my first job. I was working at that time with the financial institution of my home city, and I had to travel from Cali to Bogota to have some meetings with financial authorities of the country. This was sort of a Thursday, Friday, and my plan was to stay all the weekend with friends and family. But since I had this plan of being with friends, I did all what I could do to change my plane ticket to return on Monday morning. After, 3 or 4 unsuccessful attempts to change my flight for the next day, for Monday, I arrived to El Dorado, Bogota's airport, to take my flight on Sunday afternoon.
Sure.
I had not even tried to open the car's door, and a police officer, he came close to the car and asked my destiny. So I told him, Cali is my destiny at 8 o'clock. Oh, 8 o'clock. Well, this flight has changed the terminal. You have to hurry. So that's what I did. I arrived to the other terminal. The airline attendant told me that this flight to Cali left from the other terminal. This woman, she just encouraged me to hurry because I was going to miss my plane. I head back to the main terminal. I arrived, and then there was an airline attendant, and they told me that the flight was going to be canceled or had been canceled or whatever, and that they were rearranging people in the other terminal. So I was, at this time, I was running out of patience and desperate of this back and forth between terminals, and if there was a cancellation. So I arrived to the Bianca counter. A man, he came close to the line, and he shared with us that the other counter was changing tickets for a 7 a.m. flight of the next day. This was Monday. Although I was really impatient, I decided to stay in the line and figure out what was happening. 2 persons that were before me, they were waiting in the line. They moved to the other counter, and then they showed me, after some minutes, they showed me their new ticket. When my turn arrived, a new assistant came in, and she asked me for my ID, and she returned my ID with my ticket, Sunday flight. So I was sort of confused with the situation, and then I asked her, what's happening? Why the confusion of terminals and the change of flights and this cancellation or attempt of cancellation or whatever? And the attendant looked at me, and she said, I don't have any information of flight cancellations. Well, I received my boarding pass, and They finally called us. It was a very lonely flight. Very few people were on board. This is on Sunday, November 26th. We arrived around 9:30 to Cali. The most shocking news was given. The 7 a.m. flight had exploded minutes after they left Bogota. And, many of those faces and names, they will never leave my memory, especially those 2 innocent people that that they showed me they were changing tickets. So it was really shocking. Very, very sad. It's shocking.
As my understanding goes, it was supposed to be the flight that Cesar Gaviria was going to be on.
The Medellin drug cartel, they planned the bomb.
Yeah.
The real motive was to kill the candidate, but he was not in the Sunday flight. He was not in the Monday flight. I know what happened. If someone told him something, or if he decided to change his day or flight or whatever, but the thing is, it was terrible.
According to witnesses, Avianca exploded before it plunged into the hills just south of Bogotá, roughly a mile from a comuna or slum.
Trataría de una jornada de trabajo sin mayores sobresaltos. El controlador, ahora retirado, recuerda que seguía el vuelo a través del radar.
A few hours afterwards, a man called a local radio station and said the extraditables had blown up the Colombian jetliner. When you first heard about it, what did you do? Were people calling you? Were family and friends trying to get in touch with you?
Yes. Especially people that worked with me and that they knew that I was intending to change my flight. A lot of people, they thought that I was that flight. It was really shocking.
Afterwards, did the police or the authorities come to you and question you about this?
Yes. Actually, I had to go to Bogota and talk with the judge.
Yeah.
Tell them what had happened that day, and that was it. I don't know what happened with investigation. But yes, they called us. They called many of the people who took the 8 p.m. flight.
I would think almost every day I would think about how I didn't get on that flight.
Eventually, I think that when you are raised in a country like Colombia, where we have been through so many things, you kind of value life that every day is a new day and it can be the last day. That you learn that things happen because they have to happen. The day you have to die, that's the day, and that's it. So, yeah, I think it's sort of a part of our culture. We're used, I don't know, not that we call death, but somehow we get used to death as part of life. Mm. It's okay that you're still living, that you have a second chance.
Yeah.
But life is today.
Yeah.
And you're living today. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. That's how we live things around here. That is something I can't forget. When they showed me their new boarding pass, I remember that they were going to fly with me in the Sunday flight, and they moved for Monday in a flight of death. Those two faces, that's something I can't forget. I have those faces present every day of my life.
It's something you think about. You would never want your children to have to. I mean, it's
exactly.
Yeah, it's. I've heard a lot of people tell stories about this and that, but this is different. This is like there's something about flying and not getting on that flight. Taking the other flight.
But I did everything. Everything I could have done to get into that flight, and I didn't make it.
When you were on the flight, when you were on the other flight, were you? Well, I guess you wouldn't be thinking anything at that point. Yeah.
No. Actually, I was really sad because I could not stay for a couple of more hours with my friends. That was it.
How do you process this afterwards? That's what I'm interested to know.
Well, actually, people in Colombia, we are very resilient.
Yeah.
Or you work on going over these things, or you just can't move.
My understanding was it wasn't until that evening that they started to realize that this happened not as a result of pilot error or something like that, but as an intended act.
The first thing that I had to do was to tell people that this was a real attack, because there was also some rumors that this had been a problem with the airplane, that the airplane had, they never talked about a bomb. They
a terrorist act, yeah.
That the aircraft had a problem.
Accident, something like that, yeah.
Actually, 2 years ago, one of the main newspaper of Colombia showed up suggesting that the explosion was caused by a technical issue.
Yeah, I read that.
And
I read that.
they talked about an investigation report, but they did not take into account testimonies of the airline or information of victims or the survivors like me that were just lucky and blessed with a second opportunity in life. I know how they can talk about a technical issue when there is so much information that this really was a bomb.
Yeah. Someone who we interviewed for this project, he said something to me that was interesting, which was he said that Colombians, and he's Colombian himself, he said that Colombians have something that he calls the Colombian superpower, and that is the ability to forget. Now,
yes, we are resilient completely.
Yeah. And he said something similar to what you said about that's what you have to do here. You have to move on. You have to go. He was talking about walking by a park where there was a bomb that went off one day in Medellin. And he said, what are you going to do? Not walk the same way you walk every day? That's just what you have to do.
Exactly. But what he says, it's true. The thing is, so many things happen or have happened in this country in all these years that what happens at 7:00 in the morning, you just forget, because at 9:00 there's another situation. And then at 3:00 in the afternoon, you have another thing. So, you just can't keep up the score of what's happening,
Then you went into the aviation industry.
Yes. While I was there was an investigation. The Aviation Authority also investigates accidents.
Sure.
And there was part of an investigation while I was working there about this flight. Actually, I don't know what happened, because since I was part of that situation, I was never part of the investigation. I didn't really want to know what happened.
No, mira, lo del avión de Avianca es muy claro. Lo planea Carlos Castaño Gil, que era un hombre de Pablo Escobar, después fue nuestro enemigo.
The people who did all the planning for this terrorist attack were Carlos Castaño, who at the time was working for Escobar, but later on he became an enemy to Pablo Escobar, working for the CIA. Carlos Mario Arias y Pablo Escobar. They were the masterminds behind the attack.
Someone told me something that made my jaw drop. And that was that apparently there's a report. Now, I haven't seen this, so I can't verify this, and it's probably not good to speculate, but I'm going to do it anyway. There was a report that came out recently that it wasn't a bomb on the plane, that it actually was some sort of accident. Do you think this is true?
No, eso es pago por el gobierno. Es una investigación del periódico El Espectador.
I mean, the report was made by El Espectador, a newspaper, which is one of the most important newspapers in the country. But he was basically paid by the government. It's
fue
fake
pagado
news.
por el gobierno porque un estamento del Estado, el DAS, es los que suben la bomba. Y como hay 3 norteamericanos muertos, el gobierno le tiene mucho miedo a ese caso.
He says that the government is very afraid of this case because there were 3 American citizens killed in the bombing, and it was a Colombian agency, the DIS, the ones responsible for taking the bomb inside the plane. So it will be the government will be responsible for
now,
that.
this is a whole new wrinkle. Why would they do that?
No, ellos lo subieron por dinero.
The airplane exploded in the air. I mean, it was clear that it was an explosion.
How many years have passed since the...
¿Qué año fue?
30
En el
years?
89.
89.
Okay,
En
so,
noviembre de 1989.
I mean, it's almost 30 years, and all of a sudden, I mean, this report is recent.
Last year.
Oh, it was last year. Okay. I have a question for you. The guy who we interviewed for this podcast, a guy called John Jairo Velázquez, alias Popeye, he talked to us about, not extensively, but he did talk about Pablo planning this and having it happen and everything. There was a guy who's in jail in the United States, and now he's serving life in jail. Do you get any kind of satisfaction from that?
Probably you can feel some satisfaction, but it's not enough. And this is one of the million of acts of what these people have been doing in this country. They destroyed the country. They destroyed our values.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. Seriously, it helps. I hate bothering everybody for this, but I gotta do it. Please visit our website for a full list of credits and some cool bonus materials, like photos, videos, and declassified documents at theSicarioEffect.com. If you're not sure how to spell it, it's the name of the podcast. Or you can follow us on Instagram at The Sicario Effect, or on Twitter at Sicario Effect. There is no the in the handle. And on Facebook at Exclave Media. I'm Jonathan Branstein, your host and writer. The show is produced by me, Caitlin Tyrrell, Ernie Hurtado, and Matt Olson. Our editor is William Broughton. Our engineer, sound design, and mix, Ernie Hurtado. Co-producer, Esteban Orozco. Music composed by Preston Nowakowski. Artwork, Juan Felipe Orozco. Additional music is composed by William Broughton. Interview translator, Alejandro Caseño. Additional translation, Juliet Restrepo, Christina Madrid. Production support was provided by Daniel Urria. Special thanks to Laura Kate Jones, Mauricio Builes, Alejandro Brugas, Alejandro Doring, Alexandra Doring, Tim Fufus, Tom Freston, Ross Bernard, Kelvin Wells II, Saad Mohseni, Yoshi Obayashi, Jeff Frankel, Stephen Molina, and the fabulous Los Hermanos Orozco. Additional thanks to the Museo Casa de la Memoria in Medellin, the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, the George Bush Presidential Library and Museum, Michael Pinkney, Mary Finch, Iafit Medellin, Luisa Garces. Also, please visit the Narco Tour project at narcotour.co. That's narcotour.co. This podcast is dedicated to the memory of Guillermo Cano, Anthony Bourdain, and Larry Bresner.